everyone. Welcome to the latest episode of the Nordic Football Podcast. I'm Steve Wiss, and I'm joined with Jonathan Verdugba, as always. How are you doing, John?
Well, if I'm being totally honest with you, Steve, I'm okay, but I've been better. Obviously, we're recording this just after a night of Champions League football. And yes, Manchester United have just lost to PSG. And I'm not going to lie, I'm kind of still in shock about this tactics I've just seen from Ole Gunnar Solskjaer in that second half. So apart from that, no, I'm doing well. Hello, everyone. Hope you're all well as well. And thanks for joining us for this episode.
Why was Fred not taken off?
Don't get me started. Honestly, I'm still in shock. Honestly,
I've been there myself. I think we recorded an episode a couple of years ago after Leeds lost against Derby in the playoffs, and I was fuming that night after Frank Lampard got the better of us. So I know exactly how you feel, my friend. Maybe some talk of Scandinavian football can ease your, help relax you again a bit more. I don't know, but we've got an interesting episode coming up because we're really towards right at the end of the season, the Allsvenskan now. Later on, we're going to be talking about certainly Kalmar and the relegation battle, a few other things. But quite a few listener questions which we're going to get on with. A couple of players in focus that will come. And we're actually going to start the episode off there with an interview with Dundalk coach Shane Keegan, who joined me ahead of the Europa League match against Molde on Thursday. So that'll be a fresh hot take heading into when this podcast is released. That's where we're going to start with this interview with Shane Keegan. So I will leave you with him now. I'm delighted to be welcomed on this episode of the Nordic Football Podcast by Dundalk coach Shane Keegan. Thanks very much for coming on the show, Shane. How are you doing?
No problem at all, Steve. Yeah, keeping good. Not long after landing over here in Molde, so just settling into the hotel here.
That's good to hear. And Shane is obviously on the coaching staff at Dundalk or in Molde's Europa League group. How are you finding the country at the moment? It's fantastic scenery up there.
It is, absolutely. It's the one thing that strikes you straight away on the bus journey across, and even in the room I'm in at the moment to look out the window is an absolutely fantastic view. Just obviously how amazed by how early it gets dark here, I suppose, is the obvious statement, Steve.
Yeah, I mean, up in the north, right in the north of Norway, you're talking about the sun hardly comes up in December. So, you can see why it's a good place to see the Northern Lights, really. Anyway, on to footballing matters. And Dundalk, you are bottom of this Europa League group at the moment. But I think it's fair to say you've not exactly disgraced yourself, have you?
No. And that's, very, very, very frustrated to be pointless at this stage, really, Steve, to be honest with you. Look, you almost have to leave the Arsenal game to one side for all of the other three teams. But Arsenal aside, how we've certainly in the first round of games, how we've managed to come out of the Molde and Rapid games without anything to show for two really good performances is extremely frustrating. Look, last week we probably weren't quite as good against Rapid. We came to life in the second half, but we'd given ourselves too much of a mountain to climb at that stage. But at the same time, we feel that we have shown that we're good enough to compete against both sides.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, just talk us through the mindset of your team now, because you are bottom. The qualification, that's not going to happen. Although I suppose you never really believed that was going to be a big reality. But you're still fighting for prize money, for pride, for points. You guys are going to be really up for it for the last two games, aren't you?
We are, absolutely. So we've got 3 games left in our season, Steve. We've got the Molde game this Thursday, the Arsenal game the following Thursday, and then I suppose, I'm not sure if you're aware, but the important thing is we've got our domestic cup final sandwiched in between on Sunday. So it's a real juggling act for us now over the next few days as to how we make sure we are as competitive as possible on Thursday night, while also making sure that we're in a position to put our best foot forward in what is essentially the biggest game of the season for us on Sunday. But look, we've got a really, really good squad, plenty of depth in it. We've chopped and changed. For the last 3 months, we've had to chop and change an awful lot because the games have come every 3 to 4 days for us. So it's something we're quite used to doing. And we do feel we're in a position to be able to pick 2 sides for both Thursday and Sunday that can try and get something out of both games. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking at your squad here on Transfermarkt, and just talk us through a couple of names that Norwegian followers should watch out for on Thursday night, who might potentially make a difference.
Yeah, look, I suppose. Goals wise, quite a lot of our goals have come from David McMillan of recent. He's done very, very well for us. Also, Michael Duffy is another guy who's both creative and can score. But I suppose the strength of this panel is in the fact that it's not a team of superstars. It's more a team of collective spirit and collective organisation. And that's what's kind of served us very, very well in terms of winning so many titles over the last few years. And I think this is our sixth or seventh consecutive domestic cup final. And it's that unity and kind of team camaraderie that they've got, more so than having any outstanding individuals, I suppose, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I watched obviously the first match in Ireland, and I thought you were the better team for about 50 minutes, really. And then, Molde just kind of came good in the second half. I was impressed with the organisation of the team. I liked how your goalkeeper, especially, was commanding at the back with the defence there. And this is a situation where all the pressure's on Molde to win. Everyone expects them to win. And is that sort of? Will you relish being the underdog?
Yeah, I think that we're hoping that will work very, very much in our favour. Yeah, I'd completely agree. As you say, look, the first half, the last day back in Ireland, I thought, I'd agree with you. We were the better side in the first half. But in fairness to Molde, when it came to going through the gears and trying to turn the game around, they did do fantastically well. For about 20 minutes, we literally couldn't get out of our own half. In fairness to them, they did that extremely, extremely well. Now, again, we came back into it then late in the game, and we were frustrated not to get something late on. But I did think it was, by and large, it was a real kind of tick for tat game. I don't think there was a huge amount, which, is if we can make these games 50-50, well, then we're doing something right. Because obviously coming in, looking at bookies odds, or looking at squad values, or looking at whatever kind of parameter you wanted to weigh up the two sides, we would be big underdogs. But yeah, I thought we for vast majority of it, we gave as good as we got the last day, and we're hoping and confident that we can very much do the same this time round.
Tell us about the strange situation that's going on with your manager here in UEFA at the moment, Filippo Giovagnoli. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly.
Yeah, that's a good effort, all right. Yeah, that's a good effort.
You're basically sort of the man in charge, according to UEFA, at the moment, because of some badge thing.
Yeah. Well, look, there's paperwork is paperwork, and unfortunately, it does have to be abided to a certain extent. But yeah, look, Filippo is not allowed on the sideline at the moment for European games, because he doesn't hold a UEFA Pro license. And because I do, I'm the one cast into that role on match night. But I can assure you, it is very much Filippo is the man in charge, and we do all our work leading into the game, and he leads all of that. And in terms of what we try and do on match night, it's all well prepared, and we're myself and Giuseppe, who's the Filippo's assistant. Between the two of us, we're basically just trying to execute what Filippo wants to the best of our ability, really.
Is it one of those where you have to sneak him in the laundry basket like Mourinho did that time?
We haven't quite chanced that one yet, but given next Thursday is our last game of the season, you'd never know. You never know what stunts we might pull.
Now, yes, you mentioned you're involved in this FA Cup final match against Shamrock Rovers, and I've noticed that they actually won the League of Ireland division this year, unbeaten actually. Now, what sort of state is Irish football in these days for those who are not really aware of it? I mean, it feels to me like maybe it's on the rise again. I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, so we've had a very, very strange situation in Irish football, where the off-the-field politics has been what's grabbed the headlines over here for the last few years. The best-selling sports book in Ireland this year is a book called Champagne Football, which is basically a book about the rise and fall of the CEO of Irish football, a guy called John Delaney, who is now gone from the association, but he has been a huge figure in Irish football over the last 10 years. And there would have been a feeling, I suppose, that he wouldn't have had domestic football at the forefront of his priorities, and that potentially that was what was holding the domestic league back. The unfortunate problem now is that he is gone, but he's gone at a time where the FAI finances aren't in a great position. Throw in COVID on top of that means they certainly aren't in a great position, and whereas previously the issue was there was never a will to invest in the game domestically, now there is a will under the new stewardship of the FAI. There now is a will, but the problem now is, whereas previously there was finances to do it, now there aren't finances. So I think Irish football is probably going to have to ride it out over the next season or two. I don't see any great, I mean, the domestic prize money is absolutely paltry over here compared to most other leagues around Europe. That's a huge bugbear of clubs domestically, and in general, you know, just the marketing around the league, everything left a huge amount to be desired. But as I say, there is now at least a will to try and correct that. We're probably going to have to sit it out and sit tight for a year or two at least before we see the money being there to back it, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I've noticed that you've qualified, am I right in saying, for the Europa League qualifying next year with your league position? Would winning this cup make any difference to that?
No, and it's actually completely tied up now. Yeah, we've qualified for the Europa League, and because both teams who are in the cup final have both qualified for Europe, it now means that the team who finished fourth in the league, Sligo Rovers, they're now guaranteed Europa League action as well. So they are. But yeah, look, it was hugely important, and that was a problem for us, was that we while we were in the initial rounds of Europe, we hadn't yet assured that we were going to wrap up third position and be guaranteed to be back. So we were trying to balance making sure that we achieved that aim with trying to be competitive in Europe. So having that is secured is certainly has been a weight off our backs. So it has. So we're able to, as I say, concentrate a little bit more. Although obviously with a cup final on Sunday, we're still riding two horses to a certain extent, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like, you know, this sort of last week or so in December is obviously a big week for you in the footballing aspects of things. And just going back to the coaching situation, how difficult is it when you've got the manager actually on the sidelines, or are you really well drilled? You know, you've got plans in place.
Yeah, no, it is. It's really, really well drilled. As I say, look, you know, myself and Giuseppe would talk to Filippo before on the day of the game and say, right, if this, we literally go through every player in the field. If this guy gets injured, what do you want to happen? If this guy gets injured, what do you want to happen? Then obviously we'll look at the various different scenarios. If we're behind, what do you want to happen? If we go ahead, what do you want to happen? If we went down to 10, if they went down to 10, we just need to do a huge amount of planning. Now, I'm sure it's still extremely frustrating for Filippo on match night, because he is probably still seeing things on match night that he'd like to tweak if he was there on the sideline himself. But look, we try and make sure it has minimised the impact, I suppose, is the best way I can put it, Steve.
Just before we finish here, tell us a little bit more about the actual the place, Dundalk, in the north east of the Republic of Ireland. There, big up your town there.
Well, I suppose the first thing I'll have to do is admit that I'm not from Dundalk myself, Steve. I'm further down the country. I'm down in the Midlands in a county called Laois. But yeah, Dundalk is a fantastic little town, and it is a small town, a very small town. It's about an hour from Dublin, which would be the place I'm sure that most of your listeners would be far more aware of. An hour north of Dublin, and it's also quite close to the border for Northern Ireland. You know, an hour up the road would have you in Northern Ireland, so it would. So it's kind of in between the two, but very much in the Republic. I can tell you that. But yeah, no, look, it's a great spot, and they've had some fantastic years from a football point of view. For such a small town to have been the dominant team in the League of Ireland over the last decade has been absolutely wonderful for them, and wonderful for the whole town. And you know, over in Ireland, we've got our domestic games, which are hurling and Gaelic football. And to be honest, you tend to see more local support at ground level when teams are doing well in those sports. But Dundalk would be one of the few towns in Ireland which is primarily a soccer town, and really gets behind football. The whole town is decked out in black and white, and signs up on all the windows and everything all around town when a big occasion comes around. So look, it's been brilliant for them, and hopefully we can give them a few more big occasions.
Yeah, well, for those of you listening there anywhere in the world, if you're visiting Ireland in the summer, it's a summer league, isn't it? The League of Ireland. Get yourself to Dundalk and watch a game. In fact, watch a game over in Ireland. It's something for people to tick off their bucket list. Shane Keegan, thank you very much for joining us on the Nordic Football Podcast. Best of luck for the remaining Europa League games and that big match against Shamrock Rovers.
Cheers, Steve. Thanks very much.
Really appreciate your time. Thanks very much.
Welcome back to this episode of the Nordic Football Podcast, and that was a fascinating interview there, Steve. Well done. And it's good to get a little bit of insight from the Dundalk camp ahead of that game. It looks like they're already out, and it's looking like a toss up between Rapid Vienna and Molde for that sort of second place in the group behind Arsenal. What is your outlook for the rest of this, group stage and obviously the game coming up?
Yeah, well, I think that the most important game for Molde is definitely the last one in Vienna, because even if they were to lose at Dundalk, if they go to Vienna and win, then they are going to be qualifying because of the head-to-head record. So, I mean, they got to hope Arsenal do a job for them. They got to hope Arsenal beat Rapid Vienna, which, I mean, to be honest, you wouldn't be having monopoly money on Arsenal to win a game of football right now, would you? So there's no guarantee that'll happen, but. Yeah, it's going to go to Vienna, all the way. And I say I really enjoyed the interview with Shane. He's a nice fella. It's good to see a club like that sort of on the European stage. And, maybe they have a bit of look at the Irish in the Europa League match this Thursday. Indeed,
they're going to need a bit of luck and, maybe go out with a bit of a bang. Obviously best of luck to Dundalk, but we're probably a bit biased as well. But there are a lot of Norwegian supporters who aren't massive fans of Molde, are they, for various reasons. So, it might be a bit of a split camp there in terms of who people want to win going into that game. I'm sure we'll be providing some sort of coverage on Twitter and that kind of thing. So don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Nordic Footpod, and keep in touch, subscribe to the podcast, and we'll be giving a little bit of a coverage of that game. This is a massive game, really, isn't it, for Norway's coefficient as well. Steve, let's move on. We've got some listener questions. And I have to say that we've had quite a lot of questions actually this week, which is great. So thank you to everyone who's tweeted any questions. I'm going to pick out one for you. Not sure whether to throw you a curveball or just throw you a normal. But I think we'll start with a normal one, which is: do you think that Martí Cifuentes is going to stay in the Eliteserien, and where do you think he is going to coach? And that question is from Ramon Villageliu Arnella, I believe. Hopefully, I'll pronounce that correctly. So, thank you, Ramon. Steve, what's your thoughts on Martí Cifuentes?
I'm just struggling to see where he is going to go coach in Norway. That's the problem, John. I would love to see him stay in the division because he's done a fantastic job at Sandefjord. Me and Ben Wells discussed in the recent podcast about him in a bit of detail, and we both rate him highly. But I just don't see where a big enough job is going to be available now, because the Viking they have got rid of their manager Bjarne Berntsen, and they're going to replace him with a dual management, a bit of a Jurgen sort of thing next season, where they got two assistants who are going to be promoted to joint head coaches. That he was linked, sort of rumored there, Cifuentes at some point. I suppose Bran could be a situation where he goes, but I actually don't believe they're going to give up on Kåre Ingebrigtsen so quickly. So all the other big clubs have pretty much got their managers in, and unless like someone, maybe, I don't know, Kjetil Knutsen, maybe he's poached by a big club abroad or someone like that, or maybe, you never know, a big club can suddenly randomly lose a manager, but I just don't see a spot for him right now, Jonathan, sadly. So I think it's probably going to be somewhere else other than Norway.
Yeah, well, there are big rumours that he might be coming to Sweden, in fact. There's been quite a few links with him heading to maybe Mjällby to take over from Marcus Lantz, who will be leaving Mjällby. And yeah, just to be clear, he's already confirmed he's leaving Sandefjord, hasn't he, at the end of the season? It's already been confirmed that has. So he's obviously on the lookout for a new club, the 38-year-old. He's quite a highly rated young manager, isn't he?
Yeah, some of you might be listening and thinking, why am I talking about big clubs here, when he's only been at Sandefjord? Well, the reason is he's really impressed there with his style of football, very limited squad and stuff like that. Just very adaptable coach. And so I think it's only fair that he is sort of linked with fairly certainly bigger names, a step up from Sandefjord, if you know what I mean. Mjällby, I don't know. I mean, that kind of surprises me. I don't know how big they are in Sweden or anything, but it doesn't seem like a big jump up to me. So he might have got himself in a situation where he hasn't kind of politically managed it that well, and he's kind of, what's he left with, if you know what I mean? Sometimes beggars can't be choosers, can they, if you're out of a job? So he may have gambled on someone else taking him, I don't know. But Mjällby, to me, doesn't sound like a big step up. But I suppose you're better off in work than out of it, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, well, I'd have to disagree with you if I'm honest there, Steve. I think Mjällby would be a big step up. It's a much bigger club in general, in my opinion. And in terms of their expectations, they've had a really good season this season since being promoted. Mjällby aren't a small club in Sweden necessarily, but also, yeah, like I say, they've had a good season, and I'm sure next year the aim will be to build on it. The announcement that Lance will be leaving has come. It was a bit of a shock to Mjällby. Maybe we'll come on to that a bit later, but yeah, I think they are going to be on the lookout for a new coach, and he'd be probably quite an interesting option for them. There's also been rumours with AAB as well in Denmark.
And yeah, that would be a good step up.
Yeah, clearly this is a manager with a lot of different options. So yeah, there you go. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, Cifuentes himself has said AAB are a big club, but he does not want to give any comments yet on his future, which is probably fairly understandable. Yeah. So thank you for that question, Ramon, and we'll move on. We've got a question here now. I'm going to be honest with you, Steve. I don't know if you have a sort of kindred spirit on Twitter. I don't know if you have do you have like a long lost twin or a sort of,
not that I'm aware of, no.
A spiritual, a kindred spirit out there? Because Mark Inga is a northerner with a Leeds United bio. He's got Leeds United in his bio and a massive "Hello, we are Leeds, we are Leeds" in the flag, and a Norwegian flag in his Twitter account. So not only that, but he's got a very nice cat in his profile pic, which is, I'm pretty sure I've seen that cat somewhere before on this podcast. Seems like he's, one of you is definitely. I've never seen both of you in the same room anyway. That's all I'll say. But Mark Inga asks, well, he doesn't really ask. He says, Haugesund are so bad. And that's his comment. So I wonder what your thoughts are on Haugesund.
Well, going back to the cat, it looks a beautiful pussy, I must say. Really like the look of that one. And I mean, I've got to be honest here. This was an interesting comment because Haugesund are one of them sides we don't really talk about them much on this podcast. They're a bit like, this season, they're kind of a bit like the Elfsborg of Norway, if you know what I mean. There's not too much to say. And but they've won 4 of the last 7 games, and the 2 losses, one of them was to Molde, which I'm going to, I'll let them off that. And they lost a freak game against Ålesund when the heavens were open and there was like an incredible storm going on. So they've actually been in decent form recently. I do just wonder if that comment kind of came on the back of maybe someone had betted on them today against Mjøndalen and they failed to deliver in a 1-1 draw. It's got a late equaliser. So it may have been a bit of annoyance on that person's behalf there, but I don't think they're bad at all. They're not bad at all.
He does say, I say that as an FKH fan. So obviously he's the fan of the club.
I mean, what? They haven't been that. I mean, the whole season maybe slight disappointment compared to recent years. I mean, they had Europa League runs not so long ago in qualifying, of course. So maybe the whole season, there's a tinge of disappointment, but I didn't have them particularly high in my predictions. I think I had them about 9th or 10th. I didn't expect that much from Haugesund this year. I don't think anyone did. Like, no one thought they'd be in the relegation zone or anything, but I think they're pretty much where, you look at most people's pre-season predictions, and I reckon a lot would have had them 9th, and that's where they're going to finish between 8th and 10th or 11th. They're locked in that sort of mid-table vicinity. I don't think you can complain too much as a fan unless you really want more. But at the same time, you can't exactly praise them either that much. But in recent times, they've been playing all right.
How's my man Bruno Leite doing? Is he still there?
Yeah, he's played some good games, actually, at times. I mean, inconsistent. Like I said, they're a bit of a club. There's not really a lot to say about them at times, Augustin, this year. There's nothing. If you ask me one player from them this season that stood out, I couldn't really name you one because no one's been that brilliant or anything. I'm sure if I looked in detail, I could probably see it, but they're doing pretty much what they say on the tin. I thought this would happen with them, and that's where they are.
We'll move on. We've got a few more questions, but I'm going to save them for a little bit later in the show because they're sort of a bit more at the top of the table. We're sort of sticking around the relegation battle in Norway this week, and you've got a few comments on Odd, and then obviously, results that have taken place this evening have kind of shaken things up a little bit, haven't they?
Yeah, well, I've got to start with Odd and the COVID issues they've had. Basically, the rules are very strict in Norway. That if anyone tests positive, a player at a club, then their matches, the whole squad has to go into isolation for like 10 days, and there's postponements ensue. And unfortunately, it's just happened at the wrong time of year where they got to finish the season off. So Odd are already 2 games behind most of the other teams in there, and it's led to a really crazy finish to the year in terms of actual fixtures. We've got round 28 is taking place on Sunday and Monday. 7 fixtures on those. For some reason, we're starting at 4:00. I'm not sure exactly why. It's usually 5:00. For some reason, it's 4:00. And then there's a 6:00 game. This is UK time. Molde, Ålesund, and then Monday, Vålerenga, Rosenborg. Then it kind of gets mental. We've got 5. Round 29 is basically Odd are involved 3 times in round 29. So if you're doing the Eliteserien fantasy,
wow,
you've got a triple game week for those players, and it's kind of it's big implications for those who are doing the fantasy. But we've got Wednesday 9th of December 5 matches. Thursday 10th of December we've got 2 games. Then there's 3 more matches on Sunday the 13th of December. And then another match on Wednesday the 16th, which is Odd. And then Odd are in action again, just 1 match on its own, Saturday 19th. And then the final round, everyone kicking off at the same time, Tuesday 22nd of December, which is the latest I've ever known any match in top flight Norway in my whole life. This is 2 days before Christmas Eve. Santa's coming down his chimney not too long after this round takes place. So hopefully Odd don't get any more cases. I think they had some more positive tests, sadly, in the last few days. And we might have to extend one of the matches by 1 day. But they're going to have a crazy fixture list. They're going to be playing 4 times in the space of 9th of December till 22nd of December. So it's 4 games. 4 games.
Surely the season's going to be extended. Surely, if there's they're not going to. If there's another outbreak, what happens here? Is it?
Yeah, I think we're struggling. We're really. If there's any more outbreak anywhere, I just don't see how we get done before Christmas, and then there's implications for the relegation playoff match. Obos Ligaen's had cases. I'll be honest, I've not actually looked in detail when the schedule is for the playoff match. It's going to have to be January, isn't it? I don't know when the hell they're going to do it. Maybe back end of December. And, what about some of the pitches that, are they going to be able to play on them? Are they going to be neutral venues brought in with undersoil heating and whatever? I don't know. I need to look
do you think then, if you don't know, do you think that Odd can handle this? Or, sometimes it's a bit of an advantage, isn't it, when you've got a nice run of games, you get a bit of a rest? Or do you think this is going to sort of really disadvantage them? Because they're going for the top 3. They're only currently 6 points off third.
I've noticed, and this has happened.
2 games in hand.
This has happened in France as well. Teams that are forced to have postponements. France is different because 10 or 20 people at the whole club have been tested positive. And to be in fairness at Odd, you're talking probably half a dozen maximum. So, but I've noticed that teams that have come back from this extended COVID break tend to struggle. It takes them a while to get back into the rhythm, Jonathan. So I kind of worry for them because they've got Kristiansund away, which is a bloody hard game. And then they go to Sandefjord 3 days later, which that's a grass pitch, and it's that could be tricky. Got Strømsgodset at home 3 days after that, who are fighting for their lives, and then the final game of the season is away at Brann, which is another grass pitch. I can't imagine it'd be easy to play on. I'd be surprised if I'd get more than 6 points out of that run. So I think it's going to end their European hopes, to be honest with you. it's all well having the games in hand, but when they come thick and fast like that, and you've had players, ruled out for COVID and everything, they've not been able to train. The whole squad had to take this 10-day isolation, or a lot of people in the squad did. I think it's unlucky for Odd. They've had a good season overall, but I think they're probably going to finish, 7th now. I could probably Viking will finish ahead of them, but you never know. They might come back and get in a rhythm, but I do fear for them.
Worrying times for Odd, and let's move down to the relegation battle again, because a result that's definitely caught my eye is Bodø Glimt have failed to win a game, which is incredible. It's quite rare, isn't it? Only 4 times in 27 this season, and it's IK Start who have got a valuable point, haven't they, in a 1-1 draw, which keeps them just above water in 13th, 2 points above the relegation zone. Strømsgodset have 1 game in hand, but big point for Start, that.
Yeah, I'd be really pissed off if I was like Strømsgodset or Sarpsborg, someone like that, because like Bodø Glimt have hammered everyone all year, and now they've won the league, and it almost feels like they've down tools a bit. They've gone there to Start, and they've not played that well, and Start defended well, give them some credit, but you would be pretty damn annoyed, wouldn't you? But I'm sure if the game mattered, Bodø Glimt would have gone there and done a professional job. So it's unlucky for the teams down there alongside Start, but Mjøndalen, they conceded a late goal as well. Otherwise, they would have held on for a priceless win at Haugesund. But Mjøndalen have got 2 of their last 3 games are against Start and Ålesund. That could be 6 points. So they're not out of it yet. Strømsgodset have lost like 5 or 6 in a row. They didn't play this midweek round. Their match was against Odd, so they've had this week off, and I think that's done them a favour actually, because they need some time to get back on track. But their fixtures, there's some winnable ones there. It's going to be close. One thing it does look likely now, it seems that Brann are safe. It looks like Sandefjord are probably safe. Sarpsborg are near enough home and hose. They're limping over the line, but they're near enough home and hose. But big point for Start. Strømsgodset, Mjøndalen. I mean, at this point in time, I don't know who I'm going to predict, to be honest, to finish where.
Yeah, I mean, it's if you look at the form guide, you've got Sarpsborg, Ålesund, and Strømsgodset at the bottom 3, then Mjøndalen. And Start have really pulled away. They've been all right. The last 8 games, they've drawn 2, won 3, lost 3, which is pretty decent, and picked up 11 points, which is way more than any other teams down the bottom. At least 4 points better. Mjøndalen, Sarpsborg, Ålesund, and Godset. I mean, one thing about Sandefjord, I think you predicted them to have no chance this season of staying up, didn't you? I believe.
I did, yeah.
They've done incredibly well to stay up, haven't they?
They have. I praise Martí Cifuentes. That was the worst squad on paper heading into the season. I won't have anyone say anything else. It was the worst team on paper. They signed some good players though after that, and he's developed some of the young players. So right now, it's not the worst squad on paper. It's still pretty damn close to it. So he's done incredibly well there. Start as a team, I've got to be honest, I hope they go down. I don't like that club at all. I feel nothing for them. They've got a big stadium, which is nearly 20,000, but there's hardly any fans there. They always seem like a mercenary club, if you know what I mean. They signed a couple of old dogs, Belanios and El Macrini, in the recent transfer window, and they've always been like this. There's always loads of comings and goings at the club. And if it wasn't for the likes of, the odd youngster like Darland now, Christopher Ayer in the past, that they just feel such a mercenary unit that I just can't feel anything for them. Compare that to Mjøndalen or Strømsgodset, who actually, trying to develop their own talent, trying to develop their own identity, keep with a similar sort of core squad they've done all season. Start just feel like they're trying to almost buy their way out of trouble. And they did this when Mark Dempsey was in charge of them that season, when they came up, everyone thought they were going to do brilliantly. I don't like the club particularly, Jonathan. I just don't think they had much of the Eliteserien at all. So I would like to see them down, but there's no doubt they've finished the season quite well. Yeah,
you're not really a fan of yellow shirts, are you? I mean, you've had this problem before with was it Lillestrøm as well in their yellow shirts?
Yeah, well, I had nothing against Lillestrøm. Honestly, nothing against. I totally respect that club. It probably needed to go down. And by the way, they're like 2 points away from coming back up now. So,
Well, you weren't saying nothing against them a year ago. You were delighted.
yeah, but they deserved it.
You said you were happy they went down.
I was, because I think they deserved to go down and they needed almost a reset. But that club, is a historically big club. They know that they can come back strongly, and they're a side that most people will want to see in the Eliteserien. Start for me, I just can't feel anything for them. Nothing against any Start fans or anything, but it's just like, it just annoyed me how they just signed these sort of old veterans. It just reminded me like such a mercenary side.
Yeah, fair enough.
Always loads of guys in and out.
Fair enough. You've made your point, I think, quite clearly on that one. I mean, Mark Ingle would have been happy because Start would batter the. Well, he wouldn't have been happy. I mean, sorry, because they were battered 5-1 by Start in October, but it's not really, apart from that, for Start, it's not really been an amazing run of games. Did win back-to-back recently against Odd and Sarpsborg, but a 4-1 defeat by Viking, but a good point against Glimt. Maybe gives them a little bit of hope. I can't let this section go, Steve, without asking you about Rosenborg, because we'll read out some of the scorelines from this week just gone, and we haven't talked about the weekend's games, and I need to ask you about this because the midweek round, we've got Starbæk 1, Vålerenga 1, Arlesund 0, Sandefjord 1, Haugesund 1, Mjøndalen 1, Sarpsborg 1, Kristiansand 1, Start 1, Bodø/Glimt 1. A lot of 1-1s there, isn't there? Viking 2, Brann 0. But you go back to Sunday, Steve, and you got to rub your eyes, I think, for this one. Bodø/Glimt 5, Rosenborg 1. Now, we talked about Bodø/Glimt on and on and on, so there's no real need to dwell on them. I guess they're the champions of Norway. I'll repeat it again for all their fans. They're the champions of Norway because they've never heard that before. But Rosenborg are fourth in the table at this moment in time, Steve. And, there was a little piece of news, which we'll come on to maybe later in Sweden, but where a player from IK Sirius turned down Rosenborg. Now, do you worry about Rosenborg in general? Because, I don't think we've really talked about them too much on this podcast this season. And, they are a massive club in terms of the league. I was on a recent podcast, World Football Index, and, I described Rosenborg as like the Juventus of Norway. But to be honest, they're really struggling, aren't they, Steve? What has gone on with this 5-1? And just to widen it out a little bit, I mean, are there maybe reasons to be fearful for Rosenborg fans going forward? Because if they can't attract players from Sirius, I mean, that to me suggests there's maybe some underlying deeper problems here. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, obviously that is a worry if they can't get someone from Sirius. I certainly don't worry about Rosenborg in the long term, though. They're the biggest club in Norway. They will always land on their feet eventually. They've got good financial muscle, and in the long term they'll be up there again. But in the short term, I do worry, because it's not been a great year for them. They had a massive step backwards taking on Eirik Horneland. That really cost them, I think, having him as manager. But Olga Reed has come in, and they had an unbeaten run under him. But every time I looked at him on the bench, he was concerned, because I think I can't think of too many matches even since he took over where you're like, everything's hunky-dory. They look like they're making progress. Yeah, there were some good results in there, but there was often quite a few worrying signs as well. And I guess it all came to a hilt. Now 3 games lost in a row. I think the biggest concern actually was the loss to Brann. Not too long before the Bodø/Glimt defeat. They were so poor in that first half against Brann. I was really worried. Against Bodø/Glimt, look, I'll be honest with you, that 5-1 was a bit harsh on them. They played at times all right. Certainly when they were 2 down, they should have made it 2-1, and then who knows. But they got their ass handed to them in that game. It's simple as that. They were outcoached, outplayed. Bodø/Glimt players probably wanted it a bit more and just showed better application. So it was an embarrassing moment for Rosenborg, no doubt about it. And afterwards, the Bodø/Glimt Twitter account even embarrassed them. I do worry in the short term, because their transfer strategy is, I don't know exactly what it is. They probably need to look at getting some more younger talent in. Maybe it's difficult. It's a big off season for them, but I mean, look, you can't underestimate this club. It's a giant of a club, and they can come back.
Yeah, and while you're on that subject, there's been some talk about their sort of sporting director, isn't there? Because they've got a Swedish sporting director, I believe, Mikael Dawson. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah.
So probably why they're looking to the Swedish market. But that was a shocking display, really, losing 5-1. Lastly, before we wrap up this section, what are your thoughts on our player in focus for the week? Because we are doing 2 players in focus for this week, and this one is a player at Sandefjord you want to look at.
Yeah, and I feel like it's time I kind of gave this squad a bit more love than they deserve a bit more love than we've maybe given them all year. But one thing I said before the start of the season was how poor the squad looked on paper. But one of the players that's really stood up and be counted is the goalkeeper. And Storovic is his name. And Jakub Storovic has really impressed me this year. I think he's one of the main reasons why they have done as well as they have done. And if you to ask me my team of the season so far, he would be the guy I'd put in as goalkeeper. I think it's between him and probably Makani at Mjøndalen, or maybe Christopher Claesson at Vålerenga. But for me, Storovic is the man who's done it. He came to my focus early in the season, probably when I was betting against them, and he just popped up with a couple of annoying saves. You know, a goalkeeper does that against your team, and you think, well, where's that come from? When you don't really expect it. You know, if someone like, I don't know, think of a world-class goalkeeper, you know, I don't know, Alisson or whatever, or Edison makes a good save against you, you kind of don't blink an eyelid. You expect it. But when it's a keeper you're not really expecting much of, then you kind of get pissed off, don't you? But this became, it's not just the odd game. It became something a bit more regular from Storovic. I think he's got really good reflexes. I've been impressed with his jumping reach, if you know what I mean. He gets to a lot of balls that go into the top corner. Close range stuff, and he's really good at doing that. He had one bad game, which was against Brown, where he cost them a couple of goals. That's the only time I can really be critical of him this season. Like I say, I think there's things he can work on, and perhaps sometimes his positioning's a little bit off. But as I say, in terms of pure goalkeeping, reflexes is excellent. His actual distribution is really good as well, in terms of throwing, passing, and I think he has a good sort of communication there with his defence and everything. And there's no doubt he's come up big. He's made some really big saves for them this season. Again, I think from the penalty spot, he's saved maybe 2 or 3 penalties, which is obviously damn impressive. And you can't underestimate that defence has been one of the main reasons that Sandefjord have done well this year. And like I said, I think he's one of the main reasons that they've been allowed to sort of progress and ultimately survive. And what is impressive going into the campaign, I don't think I saw anything mentioned about him being one to watch or anything. I think he's improved as the season's gone on. So I think fair play to the player himself, credit to the coaching staff. And like I say, I've been really impressed with Storovic this year. And right now, there's still 3 games to go, but I think he'll certainly be the goalkeeper I put in my Eliteserien team of the year. And it was kind of fitting tonight. If that is the result against Aalesund that keeps them survival, 1-0 win. Aalesund sort of really laid siege the last 5 minutes. He made 2 or 3 really important saves that might have gone in on another day, but he was there, safe hands, and they got the 1-0 win. So yeah, Storovic is definitely a player that deserves a lot of praise.
Yeah, well, he's a 24-year-old goalkeeper, Jakub Storovic. He came through at Rosenborg, in fact, and he was part of the Next Gen series, which I always reflect on fondly. I remember going to a couple of Next Gen games. I remember watching Sergi Samper, Adama Traore at Barcelona as well when he was there. Now he's at Wolves, obviously. Before it got scrapped, and it was a novel tournament, that the Next Gen. It was eventually taken over by UEFA, wasn't it? Who didn't like the idea of it, and it was founded by Mark Warburton, I believe, the former QPR and Rangers manager. And then UEFA sort of came in and basically stole it and created the UEFA Youth League, which is taken over. But yeah, Storovic was in it as a 16-year-old for Rosenborg. back in 2012 or 2020. Well, I can't remember when, but yeah, under 16 level. So that's quite an interesting fact there. And yeah, I mean, it sounds like you've got some, still a young keeper. It sounds like you've got high hopes for him, Steve. Do you think he can go on? Do you think he'll move on from here, or is this sort of just a flash in the pan?
He's 24-year-old, which is quite young for goalkeepers, isn't it? I think I could see him moving on to a better club in Norway at some point for sure. Whether or not that comes next season, I don't know. But if I was looking for a keeper to upgrade in that area, he would be on my shortlist for sure, because I think he's shown a lot of good things. And like I say, just one bad match sticks out, but anyone can have a bad game, can't they? But I mean, he's been an absolute points machine in fantasy for me personally. I mean, just recently, his last 3 games in fantasy, 10 points, 8 points, and 7 points. And he's the 3rd highest scoring keeper in fantasy, a very cheap price. I cottoned on to him sort of mid-season, and he served me very, very well indeed as Jakob Storevik. And there's a lot of sort of all-round qualities to his game that are obviously have served him well this year. And we don't often mention goalkeepers too much, do we, on the Nordic Football Podcast? So I thought it was a good chance to big someone up that. And historically, goalkeepers have never impressed me in this league anyway. I'm usually criticising keepers, aren't I? So, fair play to him, and hopefully get a good move.
Yeah, you're 100% right. You are normally criticising goalkeepers. So, even I was quite surprised when I saw that you've picked out a keeper. But yeah, fair enough. Well played to Jakob Storevik. He is our player in focus for Norway this week. Coming up after the break, we will look towards Sweden, and we've got a few more listener questions as well for you, which we'll come back to. But for now, let's take a little break, and we'll see who our player in focus is for Sweden after this break as well.
Welcome back to the Nordic Football Podcast. I'm Steve Wiss, and I'm with Jonathan Verdugbe, and we're now moving to Swedish matters. Now then, Jonathan, the relegation battle, there was a very, very significant result in the penultimate round. Tell us about it.
Yes, the teams that will not die. I think that's the title of this section, because there are 2 teams in Allsvenskan who are a little bit like... I'm trying to think of a good analogy here, but, maybe like whack-a-moles in a fun park, where you beat them up, you smash them down, and next thing you know, they come popping back up again. Or, maybe like The Undertaker for people who like wrestling, because, the minute you think you've buried him, he comes back, whether it's out of his coffin or back from the dead. But yes, it's Kalmar and Falkenberg. They will not die in this league. You all remember last season, I'm sure, and Steve, I know you remember it fondly, the way they masterminded the great escapes. Their various great escapes to bury GIF Sundsvall. This season, they look to be maybe doing it again, because Kalmar pulled off a surprise defeat at AIK to keep their Allsvenskan status alive. In the process, they've relegated Helsingborg. And it really was a smash and grab raid as they triumphed in that game to see off AIK, who haven't had an amazing season. Let's not get it wrong, but they were, of course, favourites in that one. But a 1-0 win secured by Erik Israelsson in the 84th minute. And it was a proper smash and grab one, this one, Steve. It was, Kalmar have had the lowest possession in the league this season. They're a team that has minimal possession. They do not keep the ball at all. I think 41% average, the worst by quite a distance. And they kind of went to script. They sat back. AIK had all the play, and it was really a game of them trying to hit them on the break and in counters and transitions. And they did manage to get their goal late on, and it just keeps them alive, Steve. As I say, they're not out of it yet. Don't forget, EFK's win against Östersund means that it's the best they can offer. The best they can hope for is a relegation playoff. But they're doing their best to secure that relegation spot in playoff place. So Yeah, it was a really entertaining weekend in that sense in the relegation.
Do you know, when we first started doing this podcast, it was like, oh, Kalmar are always 11th. And then like a couple of years later, it was like, oh, Kalmar are always 12th. It feels like now Kalmar are always 14th. You know, they gradually slipping every year, right? I mean, they still haven't secured 14th because they could lose the last game. And they got Häcken. The Häcken are fighting for third spot. So, I mean, they could easily lose that game. And if Falkenberg get a result against Mjällby, and Mjällby don't look like they've got an awful lot at stake, although they are in good form. You know, the Kalmar are not safe. You just kind of know they're going to finish 14th, though, don't you? You just sense it. I mean, and you're right, AFK as well, just have that knack of getting over the line in recent years. I mean, Kalmar have won, 2 of the last 3. They've lost 1 of the last 5. Has there been anything particularly recently that's sort of been the key for them in allowing this turnaround and perhaps setting them up for ultimately a playoff survival?
Well, it's not all over, as you say, but, Kalmar need a point and they're safe. Not only that, but, Falkenberg have to win against Mjällby. So it's going to go to the wire. There's a 3-point gap, but obviously goal difference means that they're in a better spot. 9, there's only 1 goal difference, but Kalmar, Falkenberg are going to have to do even better than last. They're going to have to go 1 better than last year to pull this one out of the bag. In terms of Kalmar, I think they just really do what they do. They kind of have that knack when it comes to it. And it's got to a situation with Kalmar where I quite like them. I do hope they stay up. They've got a lovely, I think they've got quite a nice fan base. They've got quite a few followers on Twitter who we have, who I'm a bit fond of, who support the pod. And not only that, they've got a lovely guy on Twitter who, I don't know who he is exactly, some old guy. But every week he gives he tweets it out. I'm trying to find his address. Yeah, Over Peterson. Now, he's a private sponsor of Kalmar. You can find him on Twitter at Over Peterson. And every week he gives these support messages of support for Kalmar. Now, he looks about sort of 60 plus, maybe. He's got his grey hair and he's got his Kalmar shirt on, his red Kalmar shirt on. And every week he sends these messages of support. And they get about 9,000 views, to be fair to him. And, maybe it just seems to be working because, they seem to pull it off, and that support from the fans that seems to be helping them. So it's a really, really, it's going to be a really tight one. I think they probably should get that point. Nana Bergstrand is an old head; he's a wily old fox. Their squad's been pretty short this season. They've had injuries as well, I think, in key areas. But it's not the greatest of squads. But they just found that bit of resilience. The ARK game, it was. You just had a feeling they were going to win that game. I don't know why. It just felt like smash and grab, had it all written all over it. They were quite defensively solid. They got away with 1 or 2 at times, but in transition they weren't too bad. Romarinho was lively at times, and they've managed to get away with it again. Falkenberg are another one, but we're going to lose one of them, Steve. It's going to be one or the other as we come to the final day of the season this weekend.
Do you know what? I like Kalmar? I'm in that sort of mood tonight. I'm just going to reveal who I like and who I don't like. I like Kalmar. When I first started following Scandinavian football, sort of, I don't know, 2006, 2007-ish, they were up there. They were a contender most years. In fact, they won the league in 2008, actually. So they were always a club that they're a big club, in my opinion. They've got the infrastructures there. If they could sort themselves out a bit, they could easily rise again one day. It's a shame to see them struggling. Part of me almost wonders if they're a bit like, and I asked you this on the last podcast, I know this, that would going down do them some good and they can reset. A bit like what's happened to Lillestrøm, perhaps. Sounds like it's not a good thing in Sweden, but they just almost need a reset. And if they could hang on this year and then sort themselves out in the off-season, I mean, it's wishful thinking, isn't it? But going back to one team we do know are down at Helsingborg. Just some quick thoughts on their relegation. Again, a big club in my opinion, but for this level, and bad news.
Yeah, I mean, before I move on to Helsingborg, just to wrap it up on Kalmar. I mean, their XG against AIK, Steve, was 0.34, and AIK's XG was 1.97, which is absolutely crazy, really, when you look at it. That's just unreal, to be honest. And it's not the first time Kalmar have had a below 1 XG. Very, very regularly, they've had 0.34, 0.55 against Örebro a few weeks back. They're getting outdone on XG every week, pretty much. Really have struggled for goals. 0.09 XG against Malmö in a 4-0 defeat in October. They just haven't really been able to get the goals. To answer your question, and they don't have the possession. They don't really have the clinical strikers. They don't really have that ruthlessness. So, but yeah, like as you say, they do have. I always think with Kalmar, it's just the recruitment. And I'm not sure what they do with their recruitment. I always laugh about it in the pre-season podcast, don't I? Because they have those random signings you'll ever hear of.
That's what I mean. They sort themselves out.
I'm laughing at Rooney from Ghana, who they signed 2 years ago, who I never heard, who was never seen again. Always have some random Brazilians, and I laugh, but to be honest, it's not really benefited them as it. I just think if they could find someone who can maybe help them out in that sense and get a proper strategy in place, like you say, they have got the infrastructure. They've had a bit of a tough season in terms of the fact that they've had to play some games away from their actual stadium because of renovations and things like that. But yeah, it's if they do go down, then like you say, the reset could need to happen. But even if they stay up, they need a rethink, in my opinion. Otherwise, they are kind of drifting. In terms of Helsingborg, yeah, it's a crisis club. 2016 was the last time they went down, just before we started this podcast, and I'll never forget that game because the fans were so angry about that game. They ran onto the pitch and they attacked Jordan Larsson, ripped his shirt off from his chest. It was crazy scenes, and I think I learned in that game you don't mess with Helsingborg fans when they're angry, and took them a while to come back up again, and looked to have the makings of they stayed up last season and looked to have the makings of an okay team this season, but I don't know what's gone on with Olof Mellberg. But yeah, it's all come too late. The minute they were relegated, the board resigned. The chairman of the board has stepped down. Every board place has been made available. So if you fancy getting yourself on the Helsingborg board, Steve, get your applications in because now's the time. And then literally, I think a day later or a few hours later, Olof Mellberg announced that he would be stepping down at the end of the season. My question really is why hasn't that come before? It did seem like a club that was just going nowhere this season. I remember Andreas Granqvist, who's obviously captain of Sweden at one point. The 2018 World Cup, he was their captain and veteran defender, bit of a legend. Even after like the first or second game, he was having really, really aggressive press conferences. Really like angry, saying this is not good enough. And I remember it even after the first few games, and I remember thinking like, calm down a bit. It's still early days in the season, but he had really strong words. I remember at one point he said something like, we can't continue like this, and it's not good enough. And I bang my head in the dressing room and stuff like this. I need to bang heads together. And I remember thinking after 2 or 3 games, I was like, well, that's quite alarming when your captain is losing it like that. At one point, I think he punched a wall in anger. Yeah, and it's just kind of drifted since then. And obviously they lost Armin Djidjevic, they lost some decent players who went to Russia, but I just wonder why Melba's leaving now. I feel like maybe he could have gone a bit earlier because it seemed to become more and more inevitable as the weeks have gone by. And to leave like immediately after relegation is confirmed, it just seems to me, a little bit kind of like after the horse has bolted, after the Lord's Mayor's show. So Helsingborg down, which is they are quite a big club, so this is quite big news. Yeah,
I thought they'd kind of learned a lesson when they went down before, come back up. Had a half decent year last year, didn't they? To a degree, and they haven't kicked on. But we are the season is near enough finished in Sweden. We're getting to that stage of the year where we're thinking transfers, there's managerial changes. Is there any latest there in those departments?
Yeah, there's been quite a few big announcements. Obviously, I mentioned earlier in part 1 about Mjaldi. They'll be looking for a new manager. It was announced that basically they're going to part ways with Marcus Lantz. They can't agree on a way forward for next season. That's the stated line. It seems like maybe Lantz wants to do things his own way in terms of recruitment and has his own vision. And I'm not sure if Mjällby, the club and the board really agree with that vision. Maybe they have slightly different ideas. They've done really well to finish where they finished, and at times they've been really. I've been really impressed with them at times this season to be where they are. So yeah, I think it's a bit of a shame for Mjällby fans. I think they would have liked to have kept him, if I'm honest. But I guess there'll be opportunities for others. We just mentioned Marty Fuentes is linked, which would maybe it sounds like he's doing quite well. We could build on it. They're currently 6th, which I think is unbelievable, and the lowest they can finish is 7th, which is incredible to finish above the likes of AIK, EF Core, potentially Hammarby as well. So yeah, really really good season for them, and Lance will be set for. I'm sure he'll have people interested in taking him. The other big news managerial front is Sirius, and you remember Sirius, Steve? We had Mohamed Saeed, one of their best players on this podcast, their star striker, recently. And you can go back and listen to that episode. He talks a lot about their manager, Henrik Rydström, and the way he'd revolutionised the club. And at that time, they were having such a good season, but it's all gone a bit stale lately, and they've fallen down to 10th. They're in no danger. They'll finish sort of the lowest they can finish is 11th. But yeah, he's announced he will leave the club at the end of this season. And he's given his reasons, saying that the commute is too far for him. Now he commutes from Uppsala to, I think he lives around near Kalmar. So he is, and obviously don't forget he's played for Kalmar and is a bit of a legend there. He will be leaving the club at the end of this season, and that's a bit of a blow because his football this season with Sirius was really, really good football to watch. One of the most exciting teams, in my opinion, this season. And from what I gather from Mohamed Saeed, the players loved playing for him, really liked his ideas, really bought into his vision. So that is bad news for Sirius.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to get to that stage now. There's always a lot of off-season dealings, players out of the clubs. If you've had a good year, then you're going to be poached, aren't you, potentially, or other reasons coming in there. And I mean, we're going to do a player in focus now on someone who may well be on the move potentially in the off-season. And do you remember a podcast a few weeks ago where my prediction of a team that could get sucked into trouble was Varberg boys?
Yep.
And I was looking at their fixtures, and I feared for them, but they proved me wrong totally. And they've won 3 games in a row basically to get them out of trouble. Scored a few goals in the process as well. Bloody hell, 5, 4, and whatnot. Anyway, your profile this week is going to be on one of their strikers.
It is indeed, and it's going to be on a player by the name of Astrid Selmani. Now, you did say that, Steve. You did say you feared for them, but although I could sort of see what your point was, I never really felt worried about Varberg because they have some good players, and I think they have quite a decent manager as well, in fact. And their manager's come out with a classic line. I think the Klopp lookalike. He's come out with a really, really good line, which I'll come to in a minute on Selmani. But yeah, the player I'm going to focus on this week is indeed Astrid Selmani. He is a Swedish/Kosovan player, forward. He's 23 years old, and he's got a good number of goals this season, Steve. He's banging in left, right, and centre. 15 goals.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go on.
Yeah, I was just saying, I noticed that his goal scoring tally, it's right up there in terms of, second in the league now for top scorer. Only Christopher Nyman is ahead of him from Norrköping there. I mean, what would you say are, it's obvious question, his best qualities? What type of striker is he?
Yeah, well, this is a player that he has a big future, in my opinion. He will move on, and he's going to be a player that, if he's not snapped up this winter, he'll be shipped off to another league within not too long. He's a really multi-purpose sort of forward in the sense of he scores different kinds of goals. He can score with his head, he can score with both feet. Bit of a poacher, he scores tap-ins, but he can also finish. He scored the winner this past weekend, obviously Malmo, champions of Sweden. We talked about them in detail last week on the podcast, what they're good at and what they're not good at. He scored the winner again. It will turn out to be the winner in the end against Malmo last week. 3-2 win. He scored the third goal. It was 3-1 at the time, and then obviously Malmo pulled one back. But he scored a very nice goal in that game, and he is in fact a Malmo former youth team product. He came through at Malmo, and there's a lot of rumours at the moment that he may well end up going back to Malmo, and that's where his manager Joachim Persson came out with a classic line, where he basically said, if Malmo buy him for 10 million Swedish crowns tomorrow, the very next day he'll be worth 40 million. So I thought that was quite a funny quote, to be honest. Yeah, but essentially saying that there's no way they're going to let him go for that sort of cheap money, and also that he really, really rates him as a player. Now, I tend to agree with him, and there's been a lot of interest from Malmo. There's interest from Norrköping. There's interest from Hammarby. A lot of teams are looking at Varberg and trying to maybe snoop around. And Varberg are a team who they don't have the finances to be able to sort of really compete in Allsvenskan. They've made that clear. They've stayed up, which is an incredible achievement. But they won't be a team that's going to sort of build on that, I don't think. And they'll try and build on it, but it'll be through their own youth players, their own recruitment. They've been quite good in the recruitment space. They've got some South African players. I think they've done very well with their recruitment. They're not going to splash the cash, let's put it that way. So any money they may get from Selmani would probably not go to the recruitment. It would probably go towards actually just keeping the club going and keeping them afloat, and maybe be reinvested into the day-to-day running of the club. But they are going to get a nice fee for Selmani, I reckon, because he can do a bit of everything in that forward area. He's second in the league for expected goals as well, 13.69 xG, 15 goals scored, and he's definitely a player that, like I said, Eredivisie clubs have been looking at him, I believe, as well. So certainly one to keep an eye on.
Yeah, that is Astrid Selmani. I don't know if I pronounced that properly. I'm terrible with stuff like that. But yeah, that player in focus, one to watch there from Varberg. And that Varberg manager sounds like he doesn't just look like Klopp. He kind of acts like him as well with those type of comments. I presume he's very happy with the 5 sub rule. Let's just say that. Anyway, I suppose that's time I better ask you some questions that are coming from the listeners about Sweden. And we're going to start with one from Cal at SF Football's fan. Thoughts on how Halmstad and Degerfors will do? First season in the Allsvenskan for Degerfors since 1997. If they beat last placed Ljungskile on Saturday,
how Degerfors will do?
Yeah, how Halmstad and Degerfors potentially do in the Allsvenskan. I
watched Degerfors against Halmstad when they played each other. It was about a month or so ago now, I think. And Degerfors absolutely smashed them. And I was really, really impressed with Degerfors, I have to say. I thought they were really good. Congratulations. At Halmstad, they have some good players. They've got Samuel Kroon, who I really like. I saw him in the 3rd division when he was at Umeå, and I've liked him ever since. And he's actually exceeded my expectations, to be honest. He moved to Halmstad and he's really pushed on this year, and he's become a key man for them. He's got a lot of goals and assists combined, and really, really stepped up at level to the point where I think all Allsvenskan teams are looking at him now. They've also got a player called, I'm trying to remember his name now. It's a double-barreled name. Just bear with me 1 second. I've lost it. His name's just lost me. It's Rasmus Wiedersheim Paul, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a good player. He scores a lot of penalties, but he also he's very very technically gifted player, I think. And I've heard there's been a lot of interest in him as well from teams abroad, let alone Allsvenskan. So they've just got a good solid side. I think they're quite well drilled. Both wingers are decent, as I say, Kroon, getting balls into Wiedersheim Paul, and they've also got Mikael Bowman, who's a bit of a veteran forward. Used to be at EFK Göteborg, and they've got Crespo Kamara as well, who's a bit of there's a few names there who've been around the block in Allsvenskan. So they've managed to mould all that together and put together a very decent team. I like Halmstad. When we first started this podcast, I really enjoyed watching them because they had Sead Haksabanovic, who was at the time about, I think, 17, 18 years old. And that year they got relegated. And they had a couple of decent players. But yeah, they didn't manage to sustain it, and this will be their first time back since. But yeah, anyway, going back to the original conversation. Yeah, Degerfors smashed Hampstead 4-1 in the game I saw, and I was really impressed with Degerfors. So I think both will have something to offer next season in Allsvenskan for sure. I think keep an eye on both of them.
Yeah, I mean, I've just got to say, actually, Degerfors are not officially up yet. They've got to beat or draw against Jons Killer to confirm it. They've actually lost the last 2 games, Degerfors, and Jönköping have won their last 3. So Jönköping could still steal it. Jönköping are travelling to a club called Acropolis. It's a long way to Greece, isn't it? They're playing a side called Acropolis, and say Degerfors go to the bottom side. Both heavy favourites to win. I mean, you would expect them to get the job done, wouldn't you? But yeah, interesting stuff there. At the bottom of the table, it looks like Jönköping are down. Omea look down. Dalkurd or Grita currently in the playoff spots, and one of those sides will be facing Bromma Poikana, of course, managed by friend of the podcast Sean Constable, in a 2-legged playoff game. I'm not sure exactly who they would face, whether it's geographical or points related, but I mean, I guess we must offer our congratulations to him finishing the season well and getting that playoff spot.
Yeah, massive congratulations. Funnily enough, Acropolis, they ground share with Bromma Poikana. They're based in Stockholm. When I was out there visiting, they had a training session lined up just after BP. So yeah, I think they're newly promoted and they've done really well this season to be where they are. So they've had a good season. But yeah, Sean, very, very big, well done. It'll be a tough playoff game, that. Certainly not, certainly not going to be easy for Sean, but I think that's a massive opportunity. I think they smashed their most recent team, was it 7-1? The game they needed to win to get in to secure their playoff place. So very well done.
How disappointing would it be for Bromma Poikana if they didn't get promotion?
I don't want to think about it because I really, really want Sean to get promoted. Like I think, like you said, you're not afraid to talk about what you like and stuff on this podcast, mate. I think there's nothing I want more than them to get promoted. So I don't really want to think about it if they don't. Obviously, privately, I know from conversation with Sean as well, the situation there. So I probably can't comment too much, but I think that, yeah, all my energy is focused on hoping they go up because I think he deserves it. He's a fantastic person, a 3-time pod guest, and obviously they had a really good competition, didn't they, in the team that won the league? But he's I mean, Dalkurd are going to be, if it is Dalkurd or whoever it will be, it's going to be a tough opposition for them.
Yeah, we wish Sean Constable all the very best in that playoff match. Really be nice to see Sean make it up there to the Super N. Top bloke is Sean. Okay, just to round off the Swedish section, then I know there's another potential transfer you want to talk about. Tell us about him.
Yeah, well, the transfer season is starting to kick in, to be honest. There's been quite a few announcements. For example, Helsingborg, they've announced at least 4 or 5 players will be leaving, including Ceesay, who I think will go on and will get a decent move. I quite like him. He's a young player, can play out wide. Sometimes played on the right-hand side as well. And he's decent. A series of announced 4 players leaving at the end of the season as well. Maybe not quite as good. There's also been an announcement that AIK, Kolbeinn Sigthorsson, will be leaving the club at the end of the season. It's really not worked out for him as a signing. There was high hopes for him. I always remember him at the Under-21 European Championships about 7, 8, 9 years ago. And I always thought he could have a decent career. And it seems like career-wise, he sort of tailed off a little bit, and it seems like they're come to a mutual agreement that he will leave at the end of the season, the striker. He's just not really had much of an impact that was a desired impact. But one transfer that's been confirmed that did catch my eye in terms of transfer fee is Jesper Karlström. Now, Djurgården will be selling him. It's been confirmed to Lech Poznan in the winter coming. And it's a fairly big fee as well. So Djurgården looking to start cashing in maybe as well. There's been an announcement that I think Jonathan Ring will be leaving. Fredrik Ulvestad as well is leaving. There's rumours he might be coming to Norway. But yeah, Djurgården are going to receive about 7.5 million SEK, which is about maybe 700 grand from Lech Poznan, which is a really good deal for Karlström, I think. So yeah, he'll be off to Poland. So yeah, it's just you know what it's like, Steve. The season's sort of winding down. We've only got really the European place, maybe Elfsborg and Häcken going for it, second and third. Norrköping in fourth. But yeah, season's kind of winding down now, really. And moving to the transfer season.
Pretty much rounds off the Swedish section, doesn't it? I think that's pretty much rounds off the whole podcast. Although I think there maybe were a couple more questions. I'm not sure that we forgot about. We need to mention.
Yeah, got a few ones we'll wrap through quite quickly. We've got CJ, Ted Cruz, my son, aka Odin's creation. He says, will the Zinc be going anywhere? And what league can he go to? Any thoughts on that? And just before you answer that, Steve, just want to say thank you to at Ted Cruz, my son, because I'm not sure if you saw Spotify Unwrapped, Steve, but they recently did their list of, they recently had that list of, you can download your most listened to podcasts. And Ted Cruz, my son, tagged us as his second most listened to podcast of the year, I think it was. So thank you very much for listening to us so often in 2020, Mr. Ted Cruz.
Yeah, we very much appreciate it, CJ, very much. And it's a good question. Will the Zinc be going away? I think he's going to have to end up going somewhere. He's had such a fantastic year. He deserves to probably further himself. And I think the world's kind of his oyster, really. I think there's a lot of leagues he could go in. I personally think the Dutch league would suit him really well. He feels like that sort of player. But, I don't rule anything out. He could end up in... I think he could play English Championship level quite easily right now, in my personal opinion, and do a very good job. There's a lot of good scouting networks out there from those teams, and you could see him somewhere. I know, even Brentford or something. So somewhere probably mainland Europe, but don't rule out anywhere for the Zinc.
Fantastic stuff. And and then one more question, I think, on Norway, and that is on. It's always Bodø/Glimt, isn't it? It's the town at this moment in time, which is totally deserved. And the question is from a highfish_DID. YZO9 highfish, who asks, random question, after the likes of Evian and Haug are moving to other big teams in Europe, who do you think is next from Glimt to move? And furthermore, are there any young talents you would highlight as prodigies from Eliteserien? We have answered that one in the past, but maybe, Steve, you want to just touch on the young talents. We did have an episode, which may be worth going back to, where we looked at a lot of talents in the league. I can't remember which episode, but it was about 4 or 5 weeks ago. But in the meantime, Steve, what are your thoughts there? Is there any Glimt players on the horizon who are going to be leaving in the next few months?
Yeah, I think we've really got to watch out for Fredrik Andre Bjørkan potentially moving on. He's done a really good stint at the club now, and he might be one that could move down the line. I mean, this is a great club for talent, and I've been really impressed by the young lad who's come into defence recently, Isaac Amundsen, who he started the last 3 matches, and he looks like another great young talent there. I think probably Bjørkan, obviously there's Zinkernagel. And then there's young lads like Ola Solbakken could be the next guy. He's a really like a wide target man, in build, but really good technically. So the list is kind of endless with Bodø/Glimt, and the league as a wider as a whole. There's loads of talents out there. That's probably something we'll look at more in detail probably as the season winds down and in the off season as well. So you can't really go into too much in detail right now. But thanks for that question. Highfish _did. We will certainly have some very in-depth player profiles coming in the off-season on young talent. Watch out for them. Yeah,
and Bjørkan is I think he's the son of Asman Bjørkan, isn't he? The sporting director of Bodø/Glimt, who we've had on this podcast as well, on the show in the past, which you can still check out on our archives. Follow us on Twitter at Nordic Football. You can also get us on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your pods from. Subscribe, and don't forget to share it if you can, or give us a rating. It always helps us, helps us promote ourselves and get a bit more coverage, which is nice. And as I say, thank you to Ted Cruz. He had ESPN FC number 1, so we'll be coming for your crown next in 2021, maybe there. But I think that's it for this show. And of course, if you want to support us on Patreon, patreon.com/Nordic Football Podcast for the price of a Christmas coffee or a Christmas beer. We'd always appreciate your support on that one. But I think that's about it for now. Speaking of Christmas, Steve, you got your stocking, Steve?
Oh gosh, Christmas. You know, don't even talk about Christmas yet.
Too early for you.
Too early. Flipping heck. It's bloody hell. It's December already.
2020 is nearly over.
I know. Well, good job as well. Really good job.
Indeed. And until next time, we've still got a few more rounds. We've got one more round this weekend. Obviously, relegation will be decided in Sweden. We will be wrapping up the season in the next podcast, and a few more rounds left in Norway. So from me, Jonathan Faduba, on Twitter at JFFootball, FUTBOL, and from Meatman Soccer, Steve Wiss there at Meatman Soccer. Thanks very much for listening. Goodbye.
Goodbye.